My name is Alara Vance. When I opened my eyes, I was back. The scent of expensive perfume and polished wood filled the air, a stark contrast to the damp concrete and the coppery smell of blood that had been my end. I had returned to the moment my usurper, Celeste, performed her magnanimous act of surrender. Alara, darling, Alexander is yours. I will step aside, Celeste declared, her voice a masterful tremor of self-sacrifice. A single, perfect tear traced a path down her cheek. On cue, the entire Sterling family, my family, swiveled their heads toward me, their faces a gallery of accusation. It was a scene ripped from my previous life, a life that ended in a cold alley in a foreign country, betrayed and broken because of this very moment. They had sent me away to appease her, and the moment I landed, the men she had paid were waiting. This time I would not play the sullen, rightful heir. To defeat a master manipulator, you must become the grandmaster. So, with a force that made my knees ache, I dropped to the floor. My sob was not a delicate trickle but a racking, gut-wrenching storm. Celeste, how can you say that? I cried, my voice raw with a pain I had genuinely lived. If you step aside, Alexander will hate me. Mother and father will resent me, and even William will blame me. What is the point of me being here at all? My hand shot out, seizing the silver letter opener from the desk. If you insist on this, then I will just end my suffering now and spare you all the trouble. The room plunged into a stunned silence. My father, Alistair Sterling, took a half-step forward, his face pale. My mother, Eleanor, gasped, her hand flying to her heart. My brother, William, stared, his mouth agape. And Celeste was frozen, her tearful act completely derailed. She had not expected this. When it came to the theater of despair, my bloodline wrote the original script. The first week after I was brought back to the Sterling mansion, I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Celeste, the girl who had lived my life for 18 years, was the sun around which this universe orbited. I was an asteroid, a jagged, unwelcome piece of debris crashing into their perfect system. A few days after my dramatic return, a team of workers arrived, carrying ladders and buckets of pale lavender paint, Celeste's favorite color. The entire villa was to be repainted to her taste. My room, a serene seafoam green that I was told was chosen for the nursery my mother had prepared for me, was on the list. I approached one of the foremen, my voice soft. Could you please leave my room as it is? Celeste immediately fluttered to my mother's side, her eyes welling up. You don't like the color? I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I just assumed you'd love the new palette too. She looked genuinely distressed. My mother's brow furrowed. Alara, be reasonable. It's just paint. My father folded his Financial Times. The house will look more cohesive in one style, darling. Seeing their self-righteous expressions, I understood the immutable law of this household. My voice was static. Only Celeste's tears were a clarion call. So I let my own eyes fill with tears, summoning a grief that was not entirely feigned. A grief for the life stolen, for the parents I never knew. Mother, father, I whispered, my voice trembling with a vulnerability that made my mother pause. I'm not being difficult. I heard this was the room you prepared for me. The seafoam green, you chose it yourselves. I just want to keep it. So I can pretend for a moment that I never got lost. That I grew up here with you. A tear escaped, tracing a path down my cheek. I'm sorry. I'm being selfish. I shouldn't have asked. Go ahead and paint it. Just pretend I never came back. The living room fell into a profound silence. My parents' faces, set in mild annoyance, melted into shock, then into a wave of overwhelming guilt. My mother abruptly let go of Celeste's arm and rushed to me, pulling me into an embrace I didn't know I craved. Sweetheart, no. Don't say that. Don't cry. It's my fault. We've wronged you. My father turned, his voice a bark. Who authorized you to touch my daughter's room? Leave it be. Pack your things and get out. William, who had just come downstairs, took in the scene and hurried over, patting my back awkwardly. Alara, it's okay. No one is touching your room. It's yours. Celeste stood rooted to the spot, her gentle expression stiff, a crack in her perfect porcelain mask. She hadn't expected her little gambit to be countered and checkmated in a single move. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cried harder, burying my face in my mother's shoulder. Sister, please don't be angry with me. I didn't mean to upset Mother and Father. I couldn't help it. That one sentence severed every rebuttal she had prepared. To speak now would be to kick a victim who had just come home. The sight of her face, shifting from pale to a faint shade of green, was a small, satisfying victory. After that, no one dared mention repainting the walls again. My room remained the sole bastion of seafoam green in a sea of lavender. Celeste was quiet for a time, but a predator never stays dormant for long. Her next move came on her birthday. William presented her with a sleek canary yellow sports car. The keys glittered inside a velvet box. Celeste squealed with delight, throwing her arms around his neck. "Thank you, William. I love it." The family watched, their smiles warm and adoring. I stood in the corner, the perpetual outsider. William's eyes flickered to me, a flicker of unease crossing his features. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another, smaller box. "For you, Alara." I opened it. Inside was a delicate pearl bracelet. It was beautiful, undoubtedly expensive, but next to the roaring symbol of freedom and status that was the sports car, it felt like an afterthought, alms for the pauper. Celeste glanced at it. "Oh, William, you're spoiling her too. It's so beautiful, Alara." Her words were sweet, but her eyes glittered with triumph. I stared at the bracelet, not touching it. I let one tear fall, then another. Not a loud sob, just a silent, relentless cascade. The laughter in the room died. All eyes turned to me. Choking up, my voice a fragile whisper, I said, "William, thank you. But I cannot accept this." He was taken aback. "Why not?" I lifted my tear-filled eyes, letting him see the shame and the envy. "I grew up in the dust of the countryside. How could I deserve something so precious? Celeste is a star in the sky, worthy of all the best things. Luxury cars, designer clothes. They should be hers." I gave a bitter smile, my tears flowing faster. "I just need a roof over my head and enough food to not be a burden. That's enough for me. I'll remember your kindness, but I really can't accept this." I turned and ran upstairs, my shoulders shaking, the very picture of a wounded soul. Behind me, I heard William's panicked voice. "Alara, wait. It's not like that." And my father's angry retort. "William, what were you thinking? How could you be so blatant?" Celeste was left standing, the car keys heavy in her hand, her smile uglier than any frown. That night, William knocked on my door. His eyes were red-rimmed with guilt. "Alara, I'm sorry. I wasn't thoughtful." I sat by the window, hugging my knees, my eyes swollen. I didn't answer. He slid a black bank card across my desk. "There's $3 million on there. Buy whatever car you want. One even better than Celeste's." I didn't look at the card. I just whispered, "William, I don't need things. I just feel that in everyone's heart I will never measure up to her. But it's okay. I accept it. After all, she's been with you for 18 years. William's face contorted with pain. "That's not true. You're my real sister. From now on, everything good will be for you." He practically shoved the card into my hand and fled. I looked at the sleek piece of plastic, wiped away a tear and allowed a small, cunning smile to touch my lips. "You want to play this game, Celeste? You're still an amateur." The engagement was the next battlefield. Alexander Xander Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood conglomerate, was originally Celeste's fiancé. After my return, this arrangement became the family's most awkward open secret. Celeste, ever the actress, had repeatedly played the self-sacrificing saint in front of our parents. "Mother, father," she would say, her voice dripping with feigned nobility, "this engagement belongs to the Sterlings. Now that my sister is back, of course she should inherit it. I'm willing to step aside and give my blessing to Xander and Alara." The more she martyred herself, the more my parents pitied her, and the more they subtly resented me for being the cause of her sacrifice. I was cast as the thief before I had even laid eyes on the treasure. The first time Xander came to the mansion for dinner after my return, the air was thick enough to slice. He was impeccably dressed, his posture radiating an aura of old money and quiet power. He sat across from me, his gaze a polite, impenetrable wall. For most of the meal, his attention was reserved for Celeste. They spoke of mutual friends, gallery openings and charity galas, a world written in a language I had not been taught. I was a ghost at the feast, silently pushing food around my plate. Midway through the main course, Celeste performed her masterstroke. Leaning over with a sisterly smile, she said, "You're too thin, Alara. You should eat more." Then with a calculated, clumsy shake of her hand, a large piece of red wine braised short rib, glistening with grease, slid from her fork and landed squarely on my chest. The stain bloomed across the faded cotton of my old t-shirt, a vulgar splash of red on the washed-out gray. "Oh my God," she cried, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with perfectly rehearsed remorse. "I'm so sorry, sister. It was an accident. Your shirt." Every eye in the room dropped to the stain. That shirt was a relic from my past life, bought from a flea market for a handful of coins. In this palace of silks and cashmere, it was already an embarrassment. Now it was a joke. If I showed anger, I would be the ungrateful, volatile newcomer. If I said nothing, I would be confirming my own inferiority. I looked down at the greasy mess, and instead of anger, a smile, uglier than any cry, touched my lips. Then I lifted my head, allowing my eyes to shimmer with unshed tears. "It's okay, Celeste," I rasped, my voice thick with forced bravery. "It's just an old shirt. If it's dirty, I can throw it away. I only have a few outfits like this anyway. Not like you, always in clothes with brands I can't even pronounce." I let my voice break. "I'm the one who's embarrassing the family. I shouldn't have worn something like this to the dinner table." I carefully set my napkin down, stood and bowed deeply to my parents and Xander. "I'm sorry, Mother, Father, Mr. Blackwood. Please excuse me." I turned and walked away, my back straight, each step measured and heavy, as if carrying the weight of their collective judgment. For the first time, I felt Xander's detached gaze leave Celeste and settle on me. It was no longer just polite. It was curious, tinged with a spark of pity. Behind me, my mother's voice, sharp with suppressed anger, cut through the silence. "Celeste, look what you've done." Celeste's stammered defense was weak. "Mother, I really didn't mean to." "Enough," my father interjected, his tone final. "I think you did that on purpose." The carefully orchestrated family dinner lay in ruins, shattered not by a scream, but by a tear I had refused to let fall. That night, a text lit up my simple phone. A number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. "Are you free tomorrow? I'd like to take you shopping for some new clothes. Xander." I looked at the message, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The fish had not only taken the bait, it was leaping into the boat. Of course I accepted. The next day I arrived at the upscale mall entrance precisely on time. I was still wearing the grease-stained t-shirt. When Xander saw me, his well-groomed brows furrowed slightly. "Why are you still wearing that?" he asked, his voice even. I looked at my shoes, whispering, "It's the only one I have that's still presentable enough to go out in." A complicated emotion flickered in his eyes. Without another word, he took my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, and guided me straight into the most exclusive boutique in the city. The sales staff's eyes swept over my pathetic shirt, their contempt barely veiled. But the moment they saw the black titanium card in Xander's hand, their faces transformed into masks of obsequious warmth. He gestured to a rack of elegant dresses. "Whatever fits her and whatever she likes. Wrap it all." He then turned to me, his voice softening a fraction. "Try this one on." I shrank back, shaking my hands in a panic. No, they're too expensive. I can't accept this. It's not for someone like me." His voice was cool, logical. "This isn't about you. It's about the Sterling family's reputation. If you walk around in clothes from a street market, people won't laugh at you, Alara. They will laugh at your entire family." The words were harsh, but I heard the clumsy concern beneath them. I allowed myself to be ushered into the changing room. The girl in the mirror was a stranger. Dressed in a simple, exquisite white sheath dress, she looked fragile, her face pale, her eyes holding a universe of weariness. She was a far cry from the girl who had survived on grit and cunning. Xander's eyes, when I emerged, lingered on me for a long moment, longer than they ever had on Celeste. But just as quickly the shutters came down, and his expression returned to its default detachment. He handed his card to the clerk. "Wrap them all." When we left the store, his hands were laden with a dozen shopping bags. I trailed behind him, my head bowed. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you. But I really can't." "Xander," he corrected, stopping abruptly. He turned to face me, his gaze deep and unreadable. "Alara Sterling, you don't have to live so timidly. You are the rightful daughter of this family." Under the bright mall lights, his features were sharp, his gaze intense. Instead, I laughed coldly. "You have no idea. but outwardly I let my shoulders slump. But in their hearts, I whispered, the one they see as the real daughter is still her. I'm just an outsider. I let my eyes well up again, mastering the art of the shimmering, unshed tear. I don't want to take anything that belongs to her. Not even you. I looked straight at him, my voice a fragile thread. When you're with her, you look perfect together. I wish you both all the happiness in the world. But I'll get used to being alone. With that, I grabbed a few of the bags from his hands and fled, leaving Xander standing in the middle of the concourse, his brows knitted together, his face darkening. The fool Celeste was still using the same old playbook. But I had already rewritten the rules of the game. From that day on, he began to distance himself from her. Her calls went to voicemail, he was always in a meeting. Her surprise visits to his office were met with a polite but firm secretary stating Mr. Blackwood was unavailable. Celeste was spiraling. Finally, she cornered me in the sunroom, her composure shattered. Alara Sterling, what poisonous lies did you feed Xander? I blinked, my eyes instantly filling with tears. Sister, what are you talking about? What could I possibly say to him? I only told him that I wished you both happiness and that he should treat you well. I clutched my chest, my face a mask of hurt. Don't you believe me? Is that how you see me? As the kind of person who would destroy another's relationship. Celeste choked, rendered speechless by my audacious preemptive strike. I pressed my advantage, letting the tears fall like rain. I understand now. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have come back. I shouldn't be here, a constant reminder. I'll leave the Sterling family so I won't be a bother to anyone anymore. I turned and made a show of rushing toward the door just as my parents descended the stairs. The scene they witnessed was perfectly staged, their fragile biological daughter driven to despair by their adopted daughter's cruelty. Celeste, what are you doing to your sister? My father roared. My mother rushed to my side, pulling me into a protective embrace. She's so delicate. How could you? Celeste stood frozen, her whole body trembling as she watched me, the picture of devastation nestled safely in my mother's arms. Her eyes were pure venom, promising retribution. She knew in that moment she had lost again. And this defeat was absolute. From then on, Celeste began to imitate me. She realized direct confrontation was useless, so she adopted my weapons: fragility and tears. During a family fruit tasting, the maid served me the first slice of chilled watermelon. Celeste said nothing at first. A few minutes later, she suddenly clutched her stomach, her face pale. It hurt so much. Mother was immediately concerned. What's wrong, Celeste? She leaned weakly against the sofa, her eyes darting toward my plate. It's nothing, Mother. I probably just can't handle cold food. Unlike Alara, my constitution is so much more delicate. The implication was clear. She gets the best of everything and I am neglected. In the past this would have worked. My mother would have comforted her and scolded the maid. But I was sharper now. Before my mother could speak, I let my silver fork clatter loudly to the marble floor. I clutched my chest, my face turning a deathly white, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Sister, I wheezed, do you think I stole your watermelon? I'm sorry. It's my fault. I forgot how delicate you are. While someone like me, I'm just tough. I can eat anything. Please don't be angry with me. When you're angry, I can't breathe. I really can't breathe. I forced my breathing into ragged, panicked hiccups, clawing at the collar of my dress as if I were suffocating. William, call the doctor. Now, my father shouted. The scene descended into chaos. My father tried to help me breathe. My mother wept and held me, and William rounded on Celeste, his face a mask of fury. Celeste Sterling, you did this on purpose. You know how weak Alara is. Celeste was utterly dumbfounded. She had faked a stomach ache, but I was performing a near-death experience. How could she possibly compete? The family doctor was summoned. After a thorough examination, his diagnosis was grave. Miss Alara suffers from arrhythmia and acute anxiety attacks brought on by emotional distress. She must be kept in a state of absolute calm. She cannot be upset. Not even slightly. From that day forward, my status in the household was elevated to that of a priceless, fragile heirloom. A mere frown from me would send the family into a flurry of concern. I was wrapped in a cocoon of their anxious love. Meanwhile, Celeste became increasingly isolated, a walking hazard in their eyes, someone who might accidentally shatter their new porcelain doll. But she was not one to surrender. She was simply preparing for her final, most desperate play. And I, nestled in my nest of their making, was ready for it. The stage was set for a performance that would change everything. The tension in the Sterling mansion became a physical presence, a fine dust of suspicion and resentment that settled over the gilded furniture. Celeste, now an outcast in the home she once ruled, watched me with the silent, simmering hatred of a cornered animal. She knew her subtle manipulations were useless against my grand performances of fragility. She needed a definitive, undeniable act to shatter the image I had so carefully constructed. I knew it was coming. The air itself felt charged, waiting for the storm. I made a point of being seen, of moving through the house like the ghost I was supposed to be, amplifying my vulnerability, making myself the perfect target. The day of her grand performance, I walked downstairs with deliberate slowness. The grand staircase, a sweeping curve of polished mahogany, was the centerpiece of the foyer. And there at its foot stood Celeste. The moment our eyes met, a strange, triumphant glint flashed in hers, so fast I would have missed it had I not been waiting for it. As I passed her on the landing, she let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. It was a sound of pure terror, expertly delivered. Then, with a sickening series of thuds, she threw herself down the stairs, her body a tumbling doll of limbs and silk. The crash echoed through the cavernous house, a dinner gong summoning chaos. Doors flew open. My parents and William rushed into the foyer, their faces a mirror of horror. The scene was damning. Celeste lay in a broken heap at the bottom of the staircase, a gash on her forehead weeping crimson onto the white marble. And I stood alone at the top, untouched and apparently unmoved. Celeste's trembling hand rose, a single accusatory finger pointing directly at me. Her voice was a broken whisper, tears mingling with the blood on her face. Was her, my sister. She pushed me. In an instant I became the criminal. The evidence was irrefutable. One person stood safe and sound. The other lay broken and bleeding. Even a child would know whom to believe. My father's face darkened with a storm of disappointment and rage. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. William looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger. On the floor, through her mask of pain, Celeste's lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. It was subtle, a fleeting ghost of an expression, but I saw it. She believed she had won. She had finally orchestrated the perfect crime. I looked from her broken form to the ring of accusing faces. I didn't try to argue. I didn't try to explain. What words could possibly stand against such a visceral, bloody tableau? Instead, I called upon the very fragility the doctor had diagnosed. I let my eyes, those sensitive and fragile eyes, widen in pure, unadulterated terror. My whole body began to tremble uncontrollably, a leaf in a hurricane. No. I stammered, the word a fragile wisp of sound. It wasn't me. Then I let my eyes roll back into my head. I didn't just faint, I collapsed. My body went limp, and I fell backward, my head striking the hard edge of a marble step with a sickening, bone-jarring crack that was far louder and more chilling than Celeste's theatrical fall. Just before the darkness swallowed me, I caught a final glimpse of Celeste. Her triumphant smile had frozen, then shattered into pure, uncomprehending shock. She had been playing at faking injuries. She never dreamed I would dare to play at faking death. If you dare to act, I thought, as consciousness faded, then I dare to die. Let's see who can play this game to the bitter end. I woke to the sterile smell of disinfectant and the hushed, frantic whispers of my family. The world was a blur of white. Hospital. My parents and William were clustered around my bed, their faces pale canvases of fear. The moment my eyelids fluttered open, my mother burst into fresh tears, clutching my hand. Alara. Oh, thank God. You're awake. You scared us to death. A throbbing pain pulsed at the back of my skull. I let out a soft, pained whimper. William panicked. What's wrong? Does your head hurt? Doctor. Get the doctor in here. The doctor, a serious man with a stern demeanor, rushed in and began his examination. His face was grim. There is significant trauma to the occipital bone. A concussion. He then turned to my parents, his voice low and grave. But more importantly, as I warned you before, this patient exhibits profoundly unstable psychological symptoms. This emotional shock has caused a complete somatic collapse. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, her condition is not simple. Her mental state is like a wire stretched to its absolute limit. The slightest pressure. He paused for effect. And it will snap. As her family, you must provide an absolutely safe, stress-free environment. She cannot endure even a whisper of harm or agitation again. The doctor's words were a verdict, condemning Celeste without a trial. My father's face turned to granite. He turned to where Celeste stood by the doorway, a simple bandage on her head, her injuries already treated and deemed superficial. His eyes were chips of ice. My injuries were a concussion and a certified mental breakdown. Hers were a cut and bruises. The difference in severity was a chasm. Lying weakly against the starched pillows, I turned my head slowly as if the movement caused great pain. I looked at Celeste and silent tears began to slide down my cheeks. "Sister," I whispered, my voice frail and broken. "Why would you say that? I didn't push you. I really didn't." I drew a shuddering breath, letting the tears flow freely. "I know you hate me. I know you want me gone. It's okay. I'll go. Once I'm discharged, I'll leave. I'll disappear and never come back. You can all just pretend I never existed." My voice was faint, a dying ember, yet each word was a dagger aimed at their hearts. "Nonsense," my father thundered, the sound making me flinch dramatically. "You are a Sterling. No one has the right to drive you out of your own home." Then for the first time ever he turned to Celeste with a voice of cold, hard steel. "Celeste, apologize to your sister. Now." She trembled from head to toe, stunned. "Father, you're telling me to apologize to her? You believe her and not me." "I believe the doctor," he roared, his composure finally breaking. "I believe the evidence. I reviewed the security footage from the hall camera. There was no one near you on that landing. You fell on your own, and then you had the gall to slander your sister." Celeste's face drained of all color, leaving her as pale as the hospital sheets. She had schemed, but she had forgotten the unblinking eye of the security camera that covered the staircase from a high, wide angle. My parents had known the truth all along. They had been waiting to see if she would confess. Her continued lies had sealed her fate. "No. Father, Mother, I didn't mean to. I was just confused for a moment," she sobbed, her performance crumbling into genuine desperation. "Enough," my mother cried, her voice cracking with a bitter disappointment I had never heard before. She pointed a shaking finger at Celeste. "We took you in, loved you as our own, and told you to treat Alara as your true sister. And this is how you repay us. She has suffered unimaginably and you tried to destroy her? Starting today you are moving out of the main house. Go to the guest wing. You need to reflect on the person you've become." It was a thunderclap. Celeste had been effectively exiled within her own home. She had lost. Completely. Utterly. Her eyes, burning with a hatred so pure it was almost fascinating, locked with mine. As for me, I buried my face in the pillow, my shoulders shaking with what they thought were sobs. Only I knew that beneath the starched hospital linen, I was smiling a victor's smile. The security cameras. I had known about them all along. That was why I dared to be so bold. I had calculated every move. The moment the truth was revealed would be Celeste's death blow in this war. And I had been right. With Celeste banished to the guest wing, the main house became my sanctuary, a gilded cage of their own making. My illness became the axis around which the Sterling family now rotated. Under their meticulous, trembling care, my condition became a delicate barometer for the entire household. If I heard Father mention a troublesome project at the company over breakfast, I would subtly clutch my chest, my breath hitching. If I saw a maid looking particularly stern while dusting, I would later complain of a sleepless night, haunted by the angry energy in the room. The family learned to tiptoe, to speak in hushed tones, to treat me like the fragile crystal heart the doctor had declared me to be. William cancelled his frivolous social engagements, coming home straight from work to sit with me in silence, his presence a steady, guilty anchor. My father, even during high-stakes board meetings, would call my mother to ask, "Was Alara's day peaceful?" Mother herself became my shadow, preparing my meals and herbal teas with her own hands, her eyes constantly scanning my face for any sign of distress. Xander began to visit more frequently. He no longer mentioned Celeste. Instead, he brought me small, thoughtful gifts, a first edition of a classic novel, a delicate music box that played a soft, tinkling melody. He would sit and tell me quiet, dryly humorous stories about his day, his sole objective seemingly to coax a small, fragile smile from my lips. I knew then that the balance in his heart had irrevocably tipped in my favor. But a cornered animal is at its most dangerous. Celeste, from her exile, refused to accept defeat. She bombarded my parents and William with calls and messages, crying, apologizing, swearing she had seen the error of her ways. No one responded. The doctor's warning was their scripture. Any contact with her could trigger a catastrophic relapse in my fragile state. For my sake they hardened their hearts and severed the last threads. Driven into a corner with nothing left to lose, Celeste began plotting her final desperate move. The stage she chose was the Sterling Foundation's annual charity gala, the most glittering event of the social calendar, attended by the entire city's elite. As the hosts, our family was under a microscope. That night I wore a gown of ethereal silver chosen by Xander himself. On my father's arm I made my entrance into the opulent ballroom. A ripple of whispers followed me. The story of the long-lost, tragically fragile Sterling daughter was the season's most delicious gossip. My pale complexion and delicate, hesitant demeanor only made the rumors more convincing. I played my part perfectly, offering shy smiles and speaking in a soft, breathy voice. Halfway through the evening, as the string quartet played a gentle waltz, the main lights in the ballroom suddenly died. A collective murmur of confusion rose from the crowd. Then the massive screen at the center of the stage flickered to life. At first, people assumed it was part of the evening's entertainment. But as the images clarified, a frozen silence fell over the hall. It was me. But not the me they saw tonight. This was a different Alara. In the video, I was in the mansion's sun-drenched garden, laughing freely as I chatted with the elderly groundskeeper. My smile was bright, unburdened, my face glowing with health. I reached out playfully toward a butterfly, my movements fluid and full of life. There was not a trace of the weakness or illness that defined my public persona. The footage cut to another scene. Me in my seafoam green room, humming a cheerful tune as I watered a collection of succulents, my expression one of pure, relaxed contentment. I looked like any other healthy, happy young woman, not someone teetering on the brink of a psychological abyss. The ballroom erupted. The whispers were no longer sympathetic. They were sharp with scandal. She looks perfectly healthy. An act. It's all been an act. The drama in these wealthy families, I swear. My parents' faces turned a ghastly white. The humiliation was a physical blow. Just then Celeste walked onto the stage. She was dressed in a virginal white gown, a vengeful angel ready to deliver her truth. She took the microphone, her eyes shining with triumphant tears. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing with false sorrow, "I see your confusion. Tonight I can no longer stand by and watch this charade. I will expose the liar in your midst." She thrust a finger directly at me, her voice sharpening into a blade. "Alara Sterling is not sick. She has been manipulating everyone, faking her weakness to win sympathy, using her tricks to steal my family and drive me from my home. She is the one who is cruel, deceitful, and manipulative." Camera flashes exploded like lightning, capturing my stunned expression. The room was a roaring sea of judgment. I saw my parents move to shield me, but I gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I looked at Celeste on her stage, then at the vibrant, healthy image of myself on the screen, and finally at the crowd, their faces a mix of disdain, mockery, and voracious curiosity. A slow, hollow smile of despair and self-mockery touched my lips. Then I lifted my chin, my voice soft but amplified by the microphone pinned to my dress, carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "It turns out," I whispered, the words laden with a profound sadness, "that I can only smile when I believe no one is watching." The effect was electric. A wave of sympathy immediately washed back over the crowd. "And even a fleeting moment of happiness," I continued, my voice breaking, "has become a crime." As my words hung in the air, the screen, which Celeste had believed would be her salvation, continued to play. She had only given the AV crew the first half of the footage. What followed was the fatal reversal I had orchestrated. In the garden, after my carefree laugh, my expression in the video suddenly darkened. I turned to the groundskeeper, my shoulders slumping. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy." Talking with you lets me forget my sadness for a little while. A single real tear traced a path down my cheek. But whenever I remember that my sister is suffering because of me, or that my parents are constantly worried, it feels like a stone is crushing my chest. The scene shifted back to my room. After watering the plants and humming, I set the can down and walked to the window, gazing out at the sky with a look of utter desolation. If I were gone, my on-screen self murmured, perhaps everyone would be free. Mother and father wouldn't have to worry, and William and Xander wouldn't have to walk on eggshells around me. Maybe that would be for the best. The video ended. The ballroom was now utterly, profoundly silent. If the first half had been the prosecution's evidence, the second half was a devastating defense that turned me into a martyr. A kind soul so burdened by guilt and the desire to not be a bother that she hid her rare moments of peace, even contemplating suicide to give her family peace. And Celeste, who had deliberately edited the video to mislead, who had stood on a charity stage to publicly eviscerate her fragile sister, was unmasked as the true monster. She stood frozen on the stage, her face bleached of all color, her mouth slightly agape. She had no idea that the technician she bribed had long since been bought off by Xander for double the price. The trap she had set for me had been a net waiting for her all along. Tears finally spilled from my eyes, not of victory, but of a performance so perfect it almost felt real. "Sister," I cried out, my voice cracking with raw pain. "Why would you do this to me? Do you truly wish to see me dead before you are satisfied?" Then I convulsed. I clutched my chest, my body buckling, and a trickle of crimson blood, from a hidden capsule of stage blood I had crushed in my mouth, spilled from my lips onto my silver gown. My body went limp, collapsing into Xander's arms as he rushed forward. It wasn't real, but in the eyes of the horrified elite, I had been so brutally wronged that I had literally vomited blood. My life was in danger. "Alara! Somebody call an ambulance!" Xander's shout tore through the silence. The gala descended into absolute chaos. As I was carried out on a stretcher through the parted crowd, a pitiful, broken figure, I saw security guards dragging a screaming, struggling Celeste from the stage. Her face was a mask of frantic denial, her lips repeating, "No. No, it's not like that." The game was over. The fallout from the gala was swift and absolute. In the eyes of high society, Celeste was not just guilty, she was a pariah. The story of the adopted daughter who publicly tortured her fragile biological sister, driving her to vomit blood, became the scandal of the decade. The sterling name, once synonymous with old money respectability, was now whispered about with a mix of pity and lurid fascination, all of it directed at me. My collapse secured my position as the ultimate victim. The family's private doctors, neurologists, and a team of the best psychologists in the city were summoned. Their unanimous diagnosis was severe, profound post-traumatic stress disorder, a complete erosion of any sense of personal safety, and a somatic manifestation of psychological trauma. The prescription was simple and absolute. I needed an environment of total control and absolute security to have any hope of recovery. It was in this atmosphere of heightened anxiety and guilt that I made my move. A family council was convened in my father's oak-paneled study. All the stern-faced uncles and aunts were present, the elders who held minority shares and sway in the family trust. I did not walk in. I was wheeled in, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, my face a mask of porcelain pallor. I looked like a ghost who had been given a temporary reprieve from the grave. A hushed silence fell as my wheelchair was positioned at the head of the table. I let my gaze drift around the room, my eyes wide and unfocused, before letting them settle on my parents. "I'm so afraid," I began, my voice a faint, trembling whisper that forced everyone to lean in to hear. "I have this constant, terrible feeling. A feeling that everything I have, this room, my family's love, it could all be stolen away in an instant. That I'll wake up and be back in the dark." I clutched the blanket tighter, my knuckles white. "Mother, Father, William, could I ask for just a little thing? Something to hold on to?" My father leaned forward, his heartache evident on his face. "Anything, darling. Anything you need." I took a shuddering breath, as if the words were almost too heavy to speak. "Could I have just a tiny, tiny share in the company? Just a single %? Only if I hold something so solid in my hands, something that can't be taken away, maybe then I could sleep peacefully at night. Just 1%. Would that be too much to ask? I looked at them with the eyes of a wounded fawn, my entire being radiating a need for an anchor in a world I perceived as terrifyingly fluid. My father's face crumpled. He slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump, including me. I let out a small, frightened gasp. 1%. What nonsense are you speaking? He boomed, his voice thick with emotion. You are my daughter. My only blood daughter. Everything the Sterling family has, everything I have built, will be yours one day. He looked around the room, his gaze challenging anyone to contradict him. To put your mind at ease, starting today I am transferring 50% of my personal shares to you. Your name will be on the deeds. No one can ever take that from you. The room went dead silent. The air was sucked out. 50%. It was more than a gift. It was a coronation. It gave me not just wealth but direct, uncontestable power over the Sterling Corporation. William was the first to break the silence. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. As long as it makes my sister feel safe, she can have every share I own. She can have the whole company for all I care. His voice was fierce, his guilt and loyalty a potent combination. My mother gripped my hand, her tears falling onto our clasped fingers. That's right. It's all yours. Your father and I don't need anything. We only need you to be healthy and happy. And just like that, without a single shot fired in a boardroom battle, I seized absolute control of the Sterling fortune. The fragile, broken bird had just become the majority shareholder. The uncles and aunts could only nod in stunned, powerless agreement. A few months later, declared stable by my doctors, I officially stepped into the company. My office was a glass-walled corner suite overlooking the city, a far cry from the dusty confines of my past life. Xander, my steadfast defender, became not only my most capable assistant, managing the complexities I was still learning, but also my most trusted partner. Our relationship had deepened, forged in the fires of the scandal and my subsequent recovery. One evening as we worked late, the city lights twinkling below us like a scattered diamond necklace, he looked up from a financial report. That day at the hospital, he began, his voice casual but his eyes intent. After the staircase incident. You already knew about the security camera in the living room, didn't you? The one that showed the landing. I slowly capped my expensive fountain pen and looked out at the sprawling city. I didn't answer. I simply offered him a small, enigmatic smile, the kind that held a universe of secrets. Some truths are better seen but left unsaid. That is the first and most important rule of adulthood in our world. He didn't press. He just nodded slowly, a look of deep, grudging respect in his eyes. He understood the game had always been much bigger than he had initially thought. My reign was peaceful, my control absolute. But the past has a way of sending echoes. Every so often a postcard would arrive at the office with no return address. The postmarks were from different dreary corners of Europe. There was never a name, just a single twisted line of handwriting, the letters jagged and furious. I'm coming for you. I would glance at the card, feel the cheap paper between my fingers and then, without a flicker of emotion, feed it into the industrial shredder beside my desk. I would then lift my cup of perfectly brewed coffee and gaze out at my domain. If she wanted to play another round, I was always ready. But I was no longer the desperate girl fighting for a place at the table. I was the house now. And the house always wins. As for her grand return, I would sometimes allow myself a cold, private smile. With the financial controls I had in place and the social exile she endured, I doubted she could even afford the plane ticket home. The postcard stopped after a year. The silence was more unnerving than the threats. I had built an empire on a foundation of perceived fragility, and for a time, it was unshakable. I was Alara Sterling, majority shareholder, the heart of the family, the woman who had gracefully overcome unimaginable trauma. Xander and I were the city's golden couple, our engagement announced in the society pages with a stunning, if slightly somber, photograph. But a ghost from the past is not so easily banished. She returned on a day of driving rain, the kind that lashes against skyscrapers and turns the world into a gray blur. There was no dramatic phone call, no warning. She simply appeared in the lobby of Sterling Tower, drenched and shivering, a pale specter haunting the polished marble and steel of my domain. I was descending from the executive floor with Xander and a phalanx of assistants when I saw her. She stood at the center of the vast lobby, water pooling around her worn-out shoes, her head uncovered, her hair plastered to her skull. She was thinner, her face etched with hardships I could only imagine. But her eyes, those were the same. They burned with a cold, undimmed fire. The security guards were already moving toward her, but she ignored them, her gaze locked on me. Ilara. Her voice cut through the hum of the building, raw but clear. The entire lobby froze. My assistant stopped mid-sentence. Xander's hand went to the small of my back, a protective gesture. I raised a hand, halting the guards. The performance had to be public. See Celeste. I stammered, allowing my voice to quaver with just the right mix of shock and fear. I took a half step back, instinctively leaning into Xander. You're back. I had to come back, she said, her voice gaining strength. I've been living in squalor because of you. While you sit in your glass tower, playing the victim. A small crowd was gathering. I could feel their eyes, their phones discreetly raised. This was her new stage. Please, I whispered, the picture of pained benevolence. You shouldn't be here. You'll make yourself sick. Let me have someone drive you somewhere. A hotel. I'll pay. It was the perfect, condescending offer, designed to paint her as the unstable one. She let out a harsh, brittle laugh. Your money? I don't want your blood money, Ilara. I want my life back. Her composure began to crack, the years of bitterness spilling out. You stole everything from me. My family, my home, my future. You're a lying, manipulative snake, and everyone here is too blind to see it. This was her mistake. The raw, unfiltered rage. It was a stark contrast to my controlled, wounded dignity. I flinched as if struck, bringing a hand to my heart. How can you say such terrible things? My eyes welled up with practiced ease. After everything that happened, I tried to forgive you. I have forgiven you. Why can't you just let us be? Why must you come here and torment me all over again? The narrative was clear for everyone to see. The unhinged, jealous outsider attacking the gracious, long-suffering heiress. Xander stepped forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl. That's enough, Celeste. You need to leave. Now. Or what, Xander? She spat, her focus switching to him. You were always her perfect little puppet, weren't you? So blind to her games. The security guards, emboldened by Xander's command, moved in and firmly took her by the arms. She didn't fight them. She just kept her burning eyes on me as they dragged her toward the doors. I know the truth, Ilara, she shouted, her voice echoing in the vast space. I know what you are. And I will make sure everyone knows. The heavy glass doors slid shut, cutting off her voice. The lobby was left in a stunned, buzzing silence. I let a single perfect tear trace a path down my cheek before turning my face into Xander's shoulder, my body trembling. It's all right, my love, he murmured, holding me close. She's gone. She can't hurt you anymore. But as he led me away, the image of her drenched, furious face was seared into my mind. She was no longer the polished rival playing subtle games. She was a wild card, stripped of everything and therefore infinitely more dangerous. Her return was not a plea. It was a declaration of war. And this time she had nothing left to lose. The confrontation in the lobby was, of course, all over social media within the hour. Sterling heiress harassed by estranged sister, the headlines screamed. Public sentiment was firmly on my side. But Celeste's words had planted a seed, a tiny, poisonous doubt. A few days later, a small, independent online publication, known for its sensationalist takes, ran a story. It was titled, The Sterling Heiress, A Calculated Rise? It didn't have proof, but it asked uncomfortable questions. It juxtaposed my devastating fragility with the cold, hard fact of my corporate takeover. It quoted anonymous sources from my past life in the countryside, describing a resilient, sharp-witted girl, not a broken doll. It was a pinprick, not a wound, but it was a start. Celeste was learning. She was no longer fighting me with tears and fake falls. She was fighting me with information and public perception. I was in my office discussing damage control with our PR head, when William stormed in, his face a thundercloud. Have you seen this trash? He demanded, throwing a printout of the article on my desk. William, please, I said, my voice calm. It's a fringe blog. It will blow over. Will it? He shot back, his eyes searching my face in a way they hadn't in a long time. Ilara, that day on the stairs. You fell so perfectly. And the blood at the gala. It was so conveniently dramatic. The room went still. The PR head looked intensely uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. I met his gaze, letting a slow, profound hurt dawn in my eyes. You too, William? My voice was a whisper of pure betrayal. After everything Celeste put me through, after the doctors, after all I've suffered, you would believe the ravings of a jealous woman over your own sister? I stood up, turning my back to him, my shoulders slumping in defeat. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong here. If my own brother doubts me. It was the masterstroke. Guilt instantly washed over his features. No, Ilara, that's not what I meant. Get out, William, I said softly without turning around. Please. He left, chastised and confused. The PR head followed, leaving me alone in the silence. I walked to the window, the city sprawling beneath me. Celeste had scored a point. A small one, but a point nonetheless. She had managed to plant a seed of doubt in my most loyal defender. The game had changed. The polished chessboard was gone. We were now fighting in the mud. And I knew with a cold certainty that her next move would be even dirtier. She was no longer trying to expose my lies. She was trying to break my spirit piece by piece. And for the first time since my return, I felt a flicker of something I thought I had buried. Genuine fear. The seed of doubt William voiced began to sprout tendrils that reached into the most private corners of my life. Xander's protective gestures became more questioning, his gaze more analytical. My mother would sometimes watch me with a strange, hesitant look when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The foundation of my reign, built so carefully on their collective guilt, was developing hairline fractures. Celeste, operating from the shadows, was methodical. She didn't give interviews or make public scenes. Instead, she began leaking curated memories to a persistent journalist, a woman named Iris who had a nose for tragedy and a skepticism of the elite. These weren't the wild accusations from the lobby. They were subtle, insidious details. A story emerged about my childhood in the countryside, painting a picture not of a victim, but of a fierce, resourceful survivor. It described a girl who could barter for the best produce at the market, who stood up to local bullies twice her size, who was known for a sharp tongue and a cunning mind. The article asked a simple, devastating question. Does a spirit like that simply shatter? Another piece featured an anonymous former associate of the family who questioned the timing of my breakdowns, noting they always coincided with moments when Celeste was gaining sympathy or when a major family decision was being made, like the share transfer. The public narrative was slowly, inexorably shifting. The comments on social media were no longer uniformly supportive. There's something off about her, one read. She's always so perfectly tragic, said another. The greatest blow, however, came from an unexpected direction. Mr. Abernathy, the old groundskeeper. A video surfaced of him looking uncomfortable in his simple home, being interviewed by Iris. She was a quiet thing, miss, he said, his voice rough with age. But tough. You could see it in her eyes. That day in the garden, she did seem sad, sure. But then she looked straight at the security camera in the oak tree. We all knew it was there, and she said those lines about feeling crushed. It felt odd. Like she was performing for an audience. It was a witness. A credible, gentle old man whose testimony carried the weight of truth. He hadn't called me a liar. He'd simply stated an observation, and that was far more damaging. The Sterling Corporation's stock price, which had been stable under my control, took a noticeable dip. The board, once cowed by my father's decree and my majority share, grew restless. Whispers of instability and reputational risk began to circulate in the financial news. The perfect fortress I had built was under siege. The breaking point came during a family dinner, the first we had attempted since Celeste's return. The atmosphere was strained. William was avoiding my gaze. My mother jumped at the slightest sound. My father ate in stony silence, the weight of the corporate unrest clearly on his shoulders. I tried to steer the conversation to be the calming presence. The new spring collection is getting excellent feedback, I offered, my voice soft. It was then that my father put down his fork. The clink of silver on china was unnaturally loud. Ilara, he said, his voice tired, devoid of its usual booming confidence. These stories, these questions from the board. We need to address this. We need to make a strong public statement. Perhaps a prolonged period of rest for you. For the good of the company. It was a demotion. A gentle, polite coup. I felt the walls closing in. The character I had crafted with such precision was now my prison. I could see the narrative slipping away, from fragile heiress to unstable leader to calculated manipulator. I knew what I had to do. I had to double down on the only role that had ever worked. My breath hitched. I didn't fake a sob or a scream. Instead, I let my hands begin to shake. I stared at my plate, my eyes wide with a dawning, genuine horror that needed no acting. "They're right," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Elara," Xander said, concern in his voice. The darkness," I stammered, my voice gaining a frantic edge. I looked at my father, my eyes pleading. "It's coming back. The feeling that none of this is real. That I'm going to wake up and it will all be gone." I pushed my chair back, standing up unsteadily. I can feel their eyes on me. All of them. Judging me. Hating me. Just like she said they would. I was no longer performing for my family. I was channeling the very real, suffocating panic of a con artist on the verge of being exposed. The fear was authentic and it made the performance flawless. "Darling, no one hates you," my mother said, rushing to my side. "But they will." I cried out, my voice cracking with a raw, painful truth. "When they see who I really am, they'll all hate me. I'm not the girl you think I am. I'm not strong, I'm not good, I'm just so tired of pretending." This was the gamble. To confess without confessing. To admit to a flaw so profound it overshadowed the specific lies. I was admitting to being broken, but in a new, more complex way. A victim of my own imposter syndrome, a soul fractured by the pressure to be perfect. I turned and fled the room, not to my bedroom but out the front door into the cool night air of the estate. I heard them calling after me, their voices laced with a new, different kind of fear. Not for my fragile health but for my sanity. I ran until I reached the old gazebo by the lake, collapsing onto the cold wooden bench, gasping for air under the indifferent stars. I had thrown a bomb into the heart of my own narrative. I had shattered the image of the composed survivor and replaced it with something much more volatile, much more dangerously unpredictable. A woman on the edge of a true breakdown. It was a desperate, reckless move. But in the economy of sympathy, a mental collapse often trumps mere deception. I had to make them fear for my life more than they doubted my past. I had to become an even bigger tragedy. As I sat there shivering, I heard footsteps on the gravel path. It was Xander. He didn't speak. He simply sat beside me, wrapped his coat around my shoulders and pulled me into his arms. "I don't care about the stories, Elara," he murmured into my hair, his voice firm. "I don't care about the past. I only care about you. The you that is here right now." I buried my face in his chest, the sobs that racked my body now completely, utterly real. I had won this round. I had reclaimed my place as the primary victim. But the cost was my last shred of inner peace. To maintain the lie, I was now forced to truly lose myself in it. The line between Elara the performer and Elara the person had blurred into nothingness. And in the quiet of the night, I was no longer sure which one was real. The days that followed my breakdown in the gazebo were a study in hushed tones and careful handling. I was no longer the fragile doll to be protected from the outside world. I was a volatile element within the home itself. My father withdrew the suggestion of a rest period. The board was told in no uncertain terms that my well-being was the family's paramount concern, and the public narrative, fed by our PR team, swerved sharply back to one of profound sympathy. Eris struggles with trauma-induced psychosis, the headlines now read. My performance had been too convincing. Celeste's leaks lost their power. What did a few childhood stories matter in the face of a woman so haunted she couldn't distinguish reality from her own fears? Her campaign of truth had been outmaneuvered by my descent into a more compelling, more tragic fiction. But living inside that fiction was a special kind of hell. The constant vigilance, the feigned jumps at shadows, the artful trembling. It was exhausting. The weight of the lie had become heavier than the truth ever was. And Xander's unwavering, patient love, the one thing that felt real in the charade, became a mirror reflecting my own deceit. The end began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. We were in the library, Xander reading a report, me pretending to sketch by the window. The silence was comfortable, but it felt like the calm before a storm brewing inside me. "Xander," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "We need to talk." He looked up, setting his papers aside, his full attention on me. What is it, my love? I put down my charcoal, my hands stained and shaking for real this time. The stories Celeste is leaking, the old groundskeeper. They're true. There was a long, heavy silence. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look angry. He simply waited, his gaze deep and unreadable. I'm not the fragile girl you think I am, I continued, the words pouring out now, a dam breaking after a lifetime of restraint. I was once. When I first came here I was lost and terrified. But I learned quickly that in this family vulnerability was a weapon. Celeste was a master of it. So I became better. I saw the security cameras. I planned the fall. The blood at the gala was a capsule. I manipulated everyone. I used their guilt to take control of the company because I was so deathly afraid of being powerless again, of being cast out and ending up in another dark alley. I finally dared to look at him, expecting to see betrayal, disgust, the end of us. I am the liar, the manipulator, the monster she says I am. The only thing that hasn't been a lie is my feeling for you. I held my breath, waiting for the judgment. Xander leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and steepled his fingers. He let out a long, slow breath. Ilara, he said, his voice impossibly calm. I've known since the hospital. I stared at him, my confession freezing in my throat. What? The security footage from the staircase. I reviewed it before your father did. I saw the angle, the way you fell. It was too precise. A genuine faint doesn't look like that. And the doctor, he's an old friend of my family. His diagnosis was generously worded. The world tilted on its axis. You knew. All this time, you knew and you said nothing? You stood by me. I saw a survivor, he said, his gaze intense. I saw a woman who had been given nothing and was fighting with the only tools she had to claim her birthright. I saw intelligence, strategy, and a ferocity that captivated me. The fragile act was just that, an act. But the woman underneath, she was real. And I fell in love with her. He had not been my dupe. He had been my silent partner. The realization was more staggering than any accusation. So what happens now? I whispered, my entire world reshaped by his confession. Now, he said, standing and coming to kneel before my chair, taking my stained hands in his. We stop fighting her on her terms. We end this war. You have the power, Ilara. Real power. Not the kind you manipulate from others, but the kind you hold in your own name. It's time to use it differently. I didn't call Celeste. I had my driver take me to the shabby apartment building where Iris, the journalist, lived. I went alone with no pretense, no performance. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. We need to talk, I said. All of us. Get Celeste. An hour later, the three of us sat in Iris's modest living room. Celeste looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. What's this, another performance? No, I said, my voice flat, stripped of all its practiced vulnerability. This is a negotiation. You want the truth? Here it is. You're right. I faked it. All of it. I saw your game and I raced you. I was smarter and I won. The hatred in her eyes flickered, mixed with confusion. But winning a war against your own family is a hollow victory, I continued. It leaves you ruling over ashes. So I'm offering you a truce. I laid a folder on the coffee table. This is a proposal. A one-time tax-free payment of $5 million. Enough for you to start a real life, anywhere in the world without the sterling name. In return you sign an NDA and you stop this campaign. You walk away for good. Celeste stared at the folder as if it were a snake. You think you can buy me off? I'm not buying you off, I said, meeting her gaze squarely. I'm offering you your freedom. From me, from them, from this endless, draining fight. You can spend the rest of your life trying to tear me down and maybe you'll succeed. Or you can take this and finally live for yourself. The choice is yours. I stood to leave. At the door I looked back at her. For what it's worth, Celeste. I am sorry. Not for winning, but for the fact that we were ever pitted against each other in the first place. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out, the cool night air feeling cleaner than it had in years. A week later, the signed agreement was delivered to my office. The leaks stopped. A month after that, a brief, polite email from a lawyer in Switzerland confirmed that a Ms. Celeste had incorporated a small art gallery in Geneva. The war was over. That evening, I stood with Xander on the terrace of our new penthouse, a place with no history, no ghosts. The city lights glittered below, A kingdom I now ruled not through manipulation, but through ownership and a quiet, hard-won peace. Do you think she's happy? I asked. Xander slipped his arm around my waist. I think she's free. And so, my love, are you. He was right. The girl who had returned full of vengeance was gone. The woman who had built a fortress of lies was gone. What remained was something new, something real. I was no longer the fake daughter or the fragile heiress. I was simply Alara. And that, finally, was enough. The end.